Hello and welcome to Forge Lore, where we do tech setups for Dungeons and Dragons. I'm your friendly neighborhood DM Steve. This is a video that I've been promising for quite a while. I actually recorded it, then just after I recorded it, we switched to TaleSpire from Owlbear Rodeo, and all that went out the window because everything changed. I added another PC, the setup changed, so here we are, finally doing a tech setup tutorial for recording Forge of Lore, our actual play D&D show. So let's get started, shall we? So this setup is actually quite complex. It's between 5 screens across 4 computers. The first computer is my main rig. CPU is a Ryzen 5700X, 8-core, 16 threads, so plenty of processor to multitask. I got 32 gigs of DDR4 3200. I use quite a bit of it. Honestly, my local OBS just sitting idle takes up about 10 gigs. And then, of course, I have my RTX 3060 with 12 gigs of VRAM, which helps out a lot too with the encoding and everything. I actually stream my DM view of TaleSpire from another computer, because if I ran it on this computer, it would bog down the recording, and we tried that. I lost frames. It was a nightmare. So I actually used Emmy's old laptop that she used to record on before we did TaleSpire, and it needed an upgrade because it couldn't do both either. So that's an old HP ZBook 17G2. It's got an i7 4710MQ, that's 4-core, 8-thread, 32 gig of DDR3, and an AMD FirePro M6100 with 2 gigs of VRAM. She used that in college for 3D rendering. Then we have what I call Odin. It's actually my home server where I back up all my files and media and everything. It's a Ryzen 1700, my old local processor that I reused. 8-core, 16 threads, so again, it's great at multitasking. Only has 16 gig DDR4 2400, and my really old, poor, tortured GTX 1050 Ti with a whopping 4 gigs of VRAM. It runs TaleSpire, kind of barely. It does crash occasionally. TaleSpire can be a bit hefty. It's still early access, but honestly, I have to hand it to TaleSpire. It runs on a 1050. That's impressive. And then lastly, just as an extra monitor and more an extra screen, a place to offload more things, I actually on my desk have set up my old Surface Pro. It's like first gen. Got an i5 4300U processor with 4 gigs of RAM, 1600. It is not speedy by any means, but I use it for improved initiative. I have my little hotkeys list there for switching music as a reminder, so it doesn't need to do much. Now let's get into a tour of the actual applications I use to run the campaign and record the show. So first up, we have Notion. Now Notion is essentially OneNote, but it's on the web and free. It's super handy. You can add pictures, you can add text, tables, code. You can have indexes and databases, essentially simple databases. Super robust, versatile, and they even are running a thing where it has built-in AI as well. Actually use a modified version of the Sly Flourishes lazy campaign template. Super useful. I'll put a link in the description. It has all sorts of essentially pre-built sections for your characters, your NPCs, locations, villains. This right here is my notes for the tech tour, this very video, but I can actually go in and show you. Let's pick an old one so there's no spoilers. You can see each episode has its own page. I have the intro and recap that I write ahead of time, then basically notes that go on. I'm not going to show much because, you know, spoilers and all that. And then I have my list of locations, cities and stuff that I've created, my random tables. I'm going to blur all these out, but it's okay because I switch them up anyway. And then, of course, every DM needs an NPC name table. You know, they're walking through a city, they ask a random guard, hey, what's your name? Any good DM has a table ready of names, pre-prepared names. I have some for the North Continent and the South Continent based off of Norse and Old English. And then of course for character sheets we use D&D Beyond, super useful for 5e. You can see Orvar's character sheet here. Spoiler alert, don't mess with Orvar. And then of course we have the star of the show, TaleSpire. I have a connection to the laptop, a remote desktop connection through NDI. I'll get into that here in a bit, but we use NDI for several things on this. This is the laptop. It's actually plugged into Ethernet and power in the next room, and I just control it remotely. It runs TaleSpire super low resolution because workstation laptop, but it gets the job done. This way I can, bring up the DM mode without revealing spoilers on the stream. And then of course we have, if I bring up the action cam, we have TaleSpire that's actually running on Odin, my server. This is another NDI video stream from the server, and again it just runs an extra copy of TaleSpire, and this is what you the audience sees, and the players see it as well, although they have of course their local version as well. And of course huge shout out to Bouncy Rock Studios, the makers of TaleSpire. When I first stumbled across TaleSpire, I fell in love immediately. I bought and downloaded it, played around with it, figured this is perfect for what we need, getting more immersive in the world. I hit them up and was like, hey, we're doing the show, but we need 5 more keys, because we need one for everyone, one for me, and one for Odin, so that we can show what's going on without spoiling the DM view. They obliged, so very grateful to them. It's an amazing community. They got a Discord that is super active. And of course they have Tales Tavern and Tales Bazaar, where you can share maps and boards. The creators are like super responsive. I've talked to several of them personally. They are great people, very helpful. They're adding new features all the time, and almost every feature that they add recently is suggested from the community. There's so much in this game that came from the community, and it's super awesome, and we want to thank them once more. So let's talk a little bit more about NDI. What is NDI? Well, it's Network Display Interface, I think. I don't know, but a company made it. It's a set of tools and protocols to deliver high quality and high bandwidth video and audio over a network. It's intended mostly for local network, but it can stream online. Corporations use it, like news broadcast companies use it to deliver streams from remote locations or different studio rooms. It's super useful, super versatile, and very high quality. And we use NDI here a lot. As I mentioned before, we can actually remote control via NDI as well. It's not just screen sharing or webcam sharing, it's remote control. Super useful in this, where I'm using 4 PCs to run the show, and I can do it all here from the single battle station, with one of them not even being in the same room. So basically I run the agent on the machines and connect to them from my main machine, and that actually pulls it in. There's plugins for OBS where you can pull an NDI stream directly into OBS and record straight off of it and add it to your overlays and compositions, which we'll get a little more into that here in just a sec. But NDI, super useful. A lot of people use it for 2 system streaming setups, like game streaming setups, without using a capture card, offloading, encoding, and decoding to a different machine. So that brings us to Discord. Just like most people out there, we play together using Discord. We also use Skype, but I'll get into that in a second. This is my left monitor. Currently, it's just me and Odin. You know, we're not playing right now, but I would have everyone in here. You can also see the Logitech software. We'll get into that here in a bit, but we use Discord because of low latency. It's very customizable as far as turning off ducking and stuff, which Skype doesn't have. Speaking of which, let's get into Skype. So we do also use Skype to record. We use Skype because it has built-in native NDI. And what that means, we all get together in a call in Skype, and I can actually pull the individual streams from each player individually from Skype and plug them into OBS as different inputs. I'm not just screen recording, 5 boxes on the screen. I'm actually pulling their direct feeds from their remote computers over Skype via NDI. Very useful for separating streams. That way, if there's crosstalk or noises, we can just mute one track. But also the video feeds. We can separate the video feeds so that we can move them around on the screen without having to reselect or anything. Super useful and versatile. However, the problem with Skype, even when using headphones, you still get Skype ducking, and I don't understand why. Skype ducking, for those that don't know, it's intended for speakerphones. When you're using speakers and a microphone on a conference call, the microphone's probably picking up everything that everyone else is saying, and to avoid rebroadcasting that, where you get that echo, it kind of mutes your mic while others are talking. And what that means is if we just use Skype to record and play, every time someone would talk, everyone else's mic would be muted, even if they're wearing headphones. For some reason, it still ducks with headphones. And I couldn't figure it out. What we do is we use Skype to record, pull the NDI streams into OBS, but we each personally mute it. We don't use it for communication whatsoever. It is purely for recording. And then we play and talk to each other over Discord. It makes it a bit complicated, but it ends up working out really well to where we're not, accidentally muting each other, and we can still get those individual streams from Skype. Now let's get into the main thing we use, which is OBS, Open Broadcasting System, or whatever it stands for. OBS, pretty much every streamer and YouTuber uses OBS. It's open source, free, extremely versatile, and the ability to add plugins makes it literally, the possibilities are endless. This is a second OBS than what I'm recording. That's why you just see the blank and you don't see me in the frame. Another thing OBS does is keying, live keying. And for those that don't know, keying is background replacement. You see behind the scenes of Marvel movies and stuff, and the scene is they're fighting in this big, epic setting, but behind the scenes you see they're just in front of a green screen or a blue screen. That's for keying. Programs like OBS will take that image and say, all right, everything that's bright green, I'm gonna remove and make transparent. That's what's happening here. Except I'm personally not really using green screen. I'm actually using Nvidia Broadcast. And if I bring it up here, you can actually see that it separates. It removes my background using AI from my video card. This is available, I think, from any RTX card. And it uses local AI to actually intelligently remove. It's not perfect, which is why you get these little blotches occasionally when I move around too much, but it's super effective, and you don't have to worry about putting a big green screen up behind you, which this is a small room and I'd have to put it up and down. Be super annoying, so might as well use the technology I have. This is the main 5-screen layout that we use for the show. You'd see my sources and scenes for OBS are quite complex. I use a lot of scene nesting, compartmentalizing your scenes. So there's a scene just for, say, my frame. That's just me, nothing else. Any changes I make to this will propagate to the solo screen, the full screen, the action cam screen. Very dynamic and makes it super easy to make minor tweaks and changes, like say when we change the border for when we change locations. It makes it super easy to update everything all at once. So as I mentioned, we actually use NDI feeds for everyone's camera. Emmy, my wife, lives here. She records in the next room to avoid crosstalk, and so she can't see what I'm doing on my screens. She actually doesn't use Skype. I pull an NDI feed directly from her since she's on the local network. That gives me the highest possible quality, lowest latency. There's plugins in OBS for NDI to pull those streams directly into OBS and control them separately. Here you see the separate audio mixers. Those all pull from NDI. And then of course, I mentioned before that the action cam is pulled from Odin, my server, who is using NDI to plug directly into my OBS. So this is just an interface of OBS. And then for initiative count, we use Improved Initiative, improved initiative.app. It's a free free program, super versatile for keeping track of initiative. You just gotta punch in numbers. It'll keep track of monster HP and stuff like that. It has a player view so that the players don't see the HP, but they can see when it's bloodied, you know, it's low on health. Basically, when we're recording, OBS has a web feature, a web browser feature, and I just point it at the player view of improved initiative. Now, we pay for improved initiative. You can join the Patreon to get more features, and that includes the customized view and stuff that you see in our overlay. I figure it's worth it for a little flair, but also there's extra features like the ability to import stat blocks directly from D&D Beyond, both player and monster. Super freaking useful. I highly recommend improved initiative if you are digital at all when playing. And of course, I tend to actually run the improved initiative on my tablet just to save some screen space. And then a lot of people ask us about our music. I actually run the music off of Odin. Odin actually connects to the Discord when we play and broadcasts the music over Discord using virtual audio cable. I'll get into that here in a bit. For our music, we actually use Alexander Nakarada and Serpent Sound Studios, link in the description. Amazing work. A lot of it is medieval and Celtic and Norse. The dude's out of Scandinavia, he knows his stuff, and he's an amazing musician. This man has hundreds of free copyright-free songs that you can use. All you gotta do is give him credit in the description. You can use it on Twitch, YouTube, whatever you want. But if you pay to his Patreon and subscribe to his Patreon, which I highly recommend, not only do you get even more music and music earlier than the free releases, you don't have to accredit him, and you can use it for commercial purposes as well. Adore his music. It fits perfectly with the Norse setting that we have. What I do is I use Foobar on Odin. So what I did is when we first started, I went through his 500, 600 plus songs and downloaded them and categorized them by mood and feeling, location, and made playlists and threw them into Foobar. You can see the different playlists here. I use Foobar because it's lightweight, but also it has global hotkeys. Now I have the second keyboard in front of me on the desk that is hooked up to Odin, and all I have to do is say, hit Alt-1, and it does a slow fade, a 5-second fade into the next playlist. It randomizes it, and now we have travel music. If I do Alt+, then suddenly we got heavy battle music. I love it. Super versatile, lightweight, amazing. Since Odin's in the Discord, it broadcasts live to the players. It gets players in the mood, you know? If you want kind of an eerie feeling, you can play some eerie music. And then for the sounders, I have a soundboard. I use SoundPad. It's free and again has global hotkeys. So I can be in TaleSpire, Alt-M, and we have ravens. I use some stock sounds, edited them a bit, mixed them up a bit. I use keyboard hotkeys to play them whenever I want. And again, the players hear that live. You know, I might have a raven call and you might see Emmy just mid-game go, uh-oh. It's very effective. And then also running on Odin, we have our world map. I use XNView Classic. I use that because it's super lightweight, very customizable. You can have multiple tabs open at once. So for any illustrations, or mostly I use it for the map, it's easy to navigate. You can just zoom in, drag around. Again, on Odin, just so that it shows up in the action cam down here. I just run it behind TaleSpire and switch whenever I need it. And then to actually create the maps, I use Wonderdraft. I think I paid for this, but it's just a one-time fee. Very useful tool for making world maps. You can sculpt land, water, add icons for cities or mountains. They got tree brushes, mountain brushes, all sorts of things that you can use to build a map. And what I actually do is I use it to place the individual points for cities on the map. And then I actually render out just those single layers of those cities and import them into Photoshop. In Photoshop, I have the map as the base layer, and then each layer on top of that is a different city that I enable and disable. And basically, I treat it like a video game. A city doesn't appear on the map unless they either already know where it is or they arrive there and discover it. Now, in order to live switch the show, switch between shots and control the cameras and everything, I actually use a lovely older piece of hardware known as a Logitech G13. It's intended for gaming. It's like a keyboard replacement for your left hand during games. It gives you a joystick, so it's analog control for movement and stuff, but I use it for video editing, and now I also use it for video switching. I use it for OBS hotkeys. Alright, so let's actually get into a breakdown of how we record Forge of Lore, because it is, again, quite complicated. As far as equipment, everyone has slightly different webcams and mics, but I personally use my DSLR that I had anyway. It's a Sony A7S. This is an amazing camera, very highly sensitive sensor that can go to an ISO that is so much higher than most cameras, especially at this price. It is aged a bit, but it does what I need spectacularly. And of course, I have on there a Sony 228mm lens. To capture it, I use an Elgato HD60S, which uses USB to capture video out of the HDMI out of the camera. My microphone is an old cheapy, very cheap Excelvin mic. I wouldn't recommend it, but it gets the job done. And of course, it does use an XLR connection and needs phantom power, so I use a DAC, digital audio converter. This is a Behringer Euphoria UM2. Really, it's simple and all I need and relatively affordable. You might notice that I have tiny earbuds in. These are called IEMs, inner ear monitors. A lot of musicians and actors will use it because they're very non-intrusive. You can still hear around you. They're used as monitors so that you can hear yourself. I use these mostly instead of headphones because the AI green screen background removal that I use doesn't really like small spots in those headphones. As you can see, it doesn't like them at all. It glitches and stuff, so I use IEMs. And these are the Shure SE215 Pro. Now, lighting is very important. It can make the difference between a cheap-looking video and a professional-looking video. There are tutorials out there for three-point lighting. That's usually what people use. It's the most effective and looks the best. My key light is a cheapy, it's called a China ball. It's just a big paper ball that has a bulb hanging in the middle of it. And what that does is that softens the light and spreads it out, makes it softer on your skin, no hard shadows, which can look very menacing and edgy. For my backlight, I actually use a newer NL660 studio panel. This is an LED panel. They're relatively cheap. Studio lights can be very expensive, but these are very effective, very cheap comparatively. They have barn doors. They can run off of batteries if you want. This I use to light my backdrop to make sure the AI on the video card knows very clearly what is me and what is the background, so it can remove the background. And it gives me a bit of a halo. It's set up high, so it gives me a bit of a halo effect. And for fill light, honestly, I just kind of use the monitors. I got 5 screens here illuminating my face, so that kind of works as fill. Plus the China ball kind of does the job anyway. Alright, so let's get into the actual workflow. Each player on their local machine is running OBS. They are recording locally as kind of a backup. Video's only 720p because frankly that's all we need. They're just going to be in that little square on screen anyway. And anytime we tend to pull their locally recorded video feed is just for the shorts so that we can rearrange the screen. So 720p does the job just fine. It also makes for smaller files because holy crap, does this show take up a lot of storage. They also use OBS to do keying and background replacement, the beautiful backgrounds that my lovely wife Emmy paints for us. Now I'm going to tell you a secret that'll make your crappy little webcam look professional, and that is LUTs. A lot of people don't realize, but the difference between amateur looking video and professional looking video is proper color balancing. You gotta make your blacks look black and your whites look white and all your colors pop the way you want them to. A lot of cameras, especially cheaper cameras and web cameras, they don't want to look professional. They're not intended to look professional. So the blacks won't quite be black. They'll be gray. And the whites, they'll be kind of gray too. It kind of squishes them down so that they can make them cheaper. But you can use a LUT, which is a lookup table, which basically adds color correction on the fly, and you can plug that directly into OBS, and it applies it in real time, and that's why everyone looks so beautiful. We also use OBS on everyone's machine for mic filters. We use an equalizer to kind of level out people's voices, make them sound more broadcasty. We use a limiter, which makes sure that if you scream like this, it doesn't ruin your ears and your headphones. Basically, a limiter says anything louder than this, I'm gonna squish down and turn down the volume for a sec until it gets quiet again, then I'll turn it back up. So we set our limiters to -6 decibels. That tends to be the standard that I learned a long time ago. Make sure that no one peaks, which is when you get so loud it's distorted or hurts your eardrums. And then we also use a noise gate. Now, a noise gate is basically noise removal. It says anything quieter than this level, just don't record, don't broadcast. So when people are typing, set down a drink or something, if it's quiet enough, the mic won't even register it. And the last filter we add is a compressor. A compressor is used in professional broadcasting to squish the range of sound. So if I'm just being quiet, it'll boost it much louder. But if I'm being really loud, it'll turn down the volume as well. Kind of levels everything out. And then on top of recording, everyone's local OBS is outputting audio via the monitoring feature to VB audio virtual cable, link in the description, to output that to Discord and Skype. And the reason we do that instead of just hooking the mic directly up is so when people scream or whisper, we can still hear them because of the compressor, limiter, all those filters we put on. And then we get into my local OBS that I use for the master recording. We record basically what's referred to as live to tape. We just hit record ourselves, stop, and then we make minor edits and publish that. All of the camera movements and stuff on the layout, they're kind of baked into the video. If we ever need to do anything with them, that's why we record video locally as well, so we can move it if we need for, say, a short. I mentioned before I use nesting, super useful for making minor changes across the board. It does make it quite complex, but once you have it kind of in your head and figured out, boy, it's just a dream. You can see the different sources here on our main 5-shot. They are actually each scene. So nesting is basically you create a scene of just one asset, and then for this major overlay, like the full overlay, instead of adding, say, the camera, the microphone, the background, I add the scenes where I've pre-composited each of those, and it allows them to, again, easily change on the fly, and it just makes it simpler. So you just add scenes instead of direct sources. For audio, you can see the audio levels here. Thanks to Skype and NDI, I have a separate leveler for each person and each line. You can also see I have one here for foobar via NDI from Odin. And then for recording, fun fact, OBS can record 6, count them, 6 audio tracks at once. Very robust. So everyone gets their own audio track. I am on track 1, Eric is on track 2, Emmy's on 3, Sam's on 4, Josh is on 5, and then I have the music and sound effects going to track 6. So that's actually baked in as I'm live switching music. And then you can see here my mic, I have monitor and output. So basically, output means it's going to record, and monitor is theoretically used so that you can use IEMs or like hear what's going on, but I output that to VB audio virtual cable, pump that through Discord and Skype so that they can hear all the little effects that I have. One of the main plugins I use that is, again, very versatile and free for OBS is the Move Transition plugin, link in the description. I set this up almost a year ago. Everything I can, I'm gonna put links in the description, so if you wanna do all this, you can set it up, and if you do, Godspeed. So the move transition, if we switch between full and action cam, you can see how all the cameras move. There's no fade, there's no out and back in, there's no just a hard cut. It actually moves them between. So instead of just blinking it out and in over here, just move it. That's why everything swaps around when we switch camera views. Very dynamic, very pretty, super easy. One last plugin I use for monitoring myself, because I'm using virtual audio cable as my monitoring. I can't pump it to my ears necessarily. There are ways, but there's a delay. It is not useful at all. One thing about hearing yourself in your headphones, there has to be 0 to little delay. Otherwise, fun fact, you can make someone not be able to speak by just playing their voice back to them after like 250 milliseconds or something. It messes with your brain when you're hearing you talk just after you say words. So I use this plugin on my mic to basically hear myself. And that makes sure that I'm being picked up on my mic, I'm not accidentally muted. And when you're recording, you always want to like hear what is being recorded, so you know if you're picking up sounds or something. When we actually sit down to record a session, everyone sets up their green screen, they set up their OBS, they bring up TaleSpire, they bring up their Skype and Discord, connect to both, and when we're ready, we hit record. We double check that we're recording. You always want to double check your recording and that we're getting the proper levels. And then we do what's called a clap sync. Now, in movies behind the scenes, you might see that little clackboard that's a whiteboard or a chalkboard, and it's got the little hand that goes up, and they're like, scene 1, take 1, click. That is known as a clapboard. They use the clapboard in movies because they record audio separate from video, and when they go into edit, they want to make sure they get exactly lined up so the lip sync isn't off and the sound effects aren't off. So what you do in editing is you slow down that footage, and as soon as that clapboard touches, you line that up to the clack of the board in the audio, and you know it's synced perfectly. Sometimes video and audio doesn't record quite lined up. In fact, OBS is kind of notorious for that, especially the more filters and plugins that you add, the more your audio is going to be off sync with your video. And that's completely normal, but can obviously be a little detrimental to the video. As soon as we hit record, we do a round of clap sync. And what that does is it makes sure that when we go into edit, all the audio is perfectly lined up. And here's a pro tip for you folks. If you are recording extra long, we tend to record about 2+ hours. The way encoding works, audio and video can sometimes encode at different speeds. Again, especially when you're using a lot of filters and stuff, or doing other stuff on your computer, and maybe there's a bit of lag. To fix that, clap sync before you stop recording. When you go into the edit, you can sync up your first clap. You go to that second clap, find out, oh, the audio didn't encode quite as fast as the video. So as the episode goes on, the audio starts getting more and more out of sync. Well, that clap at the end, I can then rate stretch, line those claps up, and then the entire episode, you know, is synced perfectly. So again, we play via Discord, just recording via Skype, and then once we're done, we do our clap sync, we stop recording. OBS will do the transcoding. Pro tip, if you're recording on OBS, you want to record as MKV. MKV is better than MP4 in that, say you lose power in the middle of recording, or the program crashes or something. The way MP4 is set up, when it's done recording, it needs to do some calculations in math. And if it doesn't do that, that entire video file is toast. It's gone, nada. You can't do anything with it. MKVs, however, can be interrupted and they still work. So if you lose power in the middle of a recording, all that you lose is everything after the power blip. Everything before the power blip, A-okay. Now the problem with MKV, Adobe Premiere and most editors don't really like it. It's kind of a special format. You cannot work with an MKV in Adobe Premiere. So OBS actually has a feature built in that will record as MKV just in case you crash or lose power. And then when you hit stop recording, it will automatically remux, which is just transcode, re-encode it, basically like transcribing, to MP4, which you can then import into your editor. Then you can just get rid of the MKV file. It was temporary. And that setting is right here in the advanced settings of OBS. Automatically remux to MP4. So when you hit stop recording, there'll be a little loading bar. You won't want to do much, and you can't do much in OBS while it's happening. And depending on the length of your recording, it shouldn't take too long. We record 2 hours. It takes maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So once we're done recording, everyone has their local video and audio recording, and we need that here in order to edit it together. We actually have a Google Drive account. Fun fact, you can create as many Google accounts as you want, and each of them has like 15 gigs of cloud storage. Funny how that works. So we have a Google account specifically for the players to upload their videos to the cloud, and so we can download them here for editing. So as I mentioned before, we record to tape, which means we record live, but then do some minor editing. And most of it's vanity, maybe taking out some technical difficulties, maybe someone's dog started going crazy or something. We want a clean show. We try to make it the highest quality as possible, and we do that via editing. And to edit, we use Adobe Premiere. So it all starts with downloading everyone's local recording. Speaking of which, let's start by talking storage. I do use a 3-2-1 backup strategy. It's the most reliable backup strategy so that we get little to no lost data. So in my local machine, I use a spinning hard drive for the storage because it doesn't need to be super fast. And I actually have 2 hard drives in there that are mirrored. So if one hard drive fails, the other one still has the data. Then we back it all up to my server, which has a 14 terabyte drive, currently using up about 2 terabytes, 33 episodes, and 2 terabytes. It's a lot of data. And then beyond that, the server will back up to the cloud. 3-2-1. That is 3 copies, 2 storage mediums, 1 offsite. So even if your house burns down, data still is in the cloud. So after we download everyone's videos and local recordings, we throw it into a template in Premiere, and I personally currently am the one that goes in and syncs everything. So I'll just kind of show a time lapse here of our editing process in Premiere. So the first thing I do is grab my master OBS recording. You can see here it has 6 audio tracks. Again, me, the players, and music and sound effects from Odin. Now, funny enough, even those individual 6 local recorded tracks aren't quite synced. So we use our clap syncs to sync up the audio. Now, this audio that I live recorded into the local recording, that's actually backup audio because it's a little lower quality because it's compressed over Skype. So it does sound a bit conference call-y, low quality, but that's why everyone records locally. Higher audio quality that doesn't need to be transmitted live and with low latency. So we use the baked-in recordings recorded over NDI and Skype as backup audio. This is useful in case someone's recording gets scrapped for some reason. Turns out they were recording the wrong mic. Anything that happens to the local recording, we still have a backup over NDI. It's lower quality, but it's saved our butts a couple times already. So after syncing up the backup audio, I move it out of the way and start importing one by one the local recordings. You'd see here I have to sync up the video and the audio because each local recording also has a discrepancy between the timing of the video and audio. And then I have to sync up the video with the master video and then the audio with the backup audio and make sure everything's in sync. And this is where we use the clap syncs. You can see that we sync up the beginning of the clip and then we go to the end, and a lot of times it will not match up because it records at different speeds. So I use the rate stretch tool, and what this does is it compresses or expands the audio or video track to match up perfectly with that clap that we do right before we stop recording. So once I have the local recording in there, I disable the backup audio in the timeline as well as the local video recording in the timeline in case we need it later, like for shorts or something. So once I have everything synced up and ready to go, that's when I add the assets, such as the intro, the end YouTube cards, and the little reminders to subscribe. We have them pre-comped, so we just throw them on there and it's all good to go. I sync up the audio, make sure it sounds good transitioning. And then for the end card, as you know, as we do the wrap-up every episode, we're running our theme song. We transition to our theme song and have that running during the wrap-up, so I transition to that. I have a 3-minute lead-in of our looping theme song that I extend out to the point where I say that's a story for next time. And it syncs up perfectly with the end cards. So once that's all synced and all those assets are added, I save it to the server, and that's where Emmy takes over. So the first thing Emmy does when editing an episode is she'll actually extract the audio from everyone's local recording and drop it into Adobe Audition. It's a sound editing program. It is very versatile. She adds a couple of filters and effects. Mostly it's rounding out the audio, adding another equalizer to kind of standardize it and make it sound sort of broadcast quality. She adds a higher noise gate to make sure that any typing or anything isn't coming in. And then she adds another limiter and compressor to make sure all the audio is kind of level. Then she exports that as an MP3 and imports it and replaces the audio that I synced in Premiere. She then goes through the entire episode and reviews it. She reviews it for times where we need to cut and put in a technical difficulties. She removes audio tracks whenever there's noise that makes it above the noise gate. Chair squeaks, typing, honking. Basically, as long as that individual person isn't talking while a noise is happening, we can just remove that noise. And that's the beauty of having the separate audio tracks. If we already combined all the audio tracks into one track, we would not be able to individually mute people during the editing. So once she's reviewed the whole episode, she does place a couple markers in there to find interesting points that can be used as shorts or as the beginning clip. As you know, we started at the beginning of our episodes having a little coming up section, kind of tease the episode. So she goes in, creates the beginning clip, adds it to the beginning, adds some transitions, and then once the edit is essentially final and locked down, she will go in and add one more audio dynamics inside of Premiere to add a compressor, which we use -20 decibel floor, 3x ratio, and a 9 decibel makeup. If that doesn't make sense, maybe do some tutorials. It's complicated. I barely understand it. But that's the compressor that squishes everything to the same volume. And then it also adds one last -6 decibel limiter to make sure things don't peak or get too loud. She adds extra things like maybe inserts, like when someone rolls a nat 20 and takes a picture, she'll take that photo, add it to their little camera in Premiere so that you can see the nat 20, because who doesn't love seeing a nat 20? And then we render that out. And then the last thing she does for each episode is the audio edit. Of course, we do have the audio-only podcasts on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, all those podcatchers. And what a lot of people might not realize is it's kind of a different episode. During the episode, as is normal, you definitely get this on remote games. You even get it when everyone's at the table. You get crosstalk when people are talking over each other, having two different conversations or interrupting. And that can be a bit of a mess, especially when you're audio only. It can get very confusing when you can't see who's talking. So Emmy actually goes in and edits the audio only version, separating out crosstalk. If, say, Eric and Josh are both saying some clever quip at the same time, to make sure neither is lost, she'll separate them and time them separately. Because you don't have to sync to a video, you can mess with time all you want. And then she saves that, renders it out as an MP3, and the episode's ready for review. We upload the video to YouTube as unlisted, and I personally review it. There's a couple reasons for this. In editing, you always want a second set of eyes. Yes, Emmy basically went through the entire episode at least twice, but Humans are imperfect, and a second set of eyes and ears never hurts. And I want to make sure that it looks good on YouTube. Maybe there's some kind of compression thing happening that maybe we can fix, but I want to make sure it transcodes on YouTube okay. So I upload it as unlisted and watch it, usually on my phone, because that's how a lot of people watch our show, on their little phone. As I'm going through this review, I'm not just looking for mistakes or maybe noises that were accidentally kept in, but I'm also writing down timestamps. In each of our episodes, you can see in the seek bar on YouTube, the chapters. And I like doing cleverly named chapters. Yes, you're welcome. I like to put a lot of little jokes in there. It's fun. So I'll write down the timestamps, and once I get to the end of the episode, if no more edits are required, then I'll add those timestamps to create the chapters in YouTube. Fun fact, when you're uploading a video to YouTube, all you gotta do is put timestamps in a certain format in the description, and YouTube will automatically convert them to chapters. This is especially useful on long-form videos like ours that are 2+ hours long. A lot of people won't watch them in one sitting, and sometimes YouTube is really bad at remembering where you were in the middle of a video, especially a long one. So we add the chapters that make it useful for when you go back to the video, you're like, where was I? Oh yeah, they just met up with Orvar. Okay, let's go there. Just convenient. And then once that's all approved, I'll go ahead and schedule it for release on Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, usually 5 p.m. UK. Stupid British time. Hell, stupid daylight savings. Not the point. The very last step is our beautiful artist and my lovely wife, Emmy, will create the thumbnail. Now, when we first started this show, we had everyone do a glamour photo shoot in front of a green screen. So we have hundreds of pictures of everyone doing different funny poses, dressed up or not dressed up, and she will take that into a template in Photoshop. She'll choose a picture appropriate for the episode. She'll throw that into Photoshop, key out the green, add some nice little effects. I don't know what she does. I'm not an artist, she is, but she makes it look real pretty. And the last thing she does is she writes what we call the copy, which is essentially the description of the episode that you see at the top of the YouTube episode description and the podcast description. And then everything's ready for your consumption. Well, that about wraps it up for this tech tour. I could get more involved in the OBS setup or technical details of how to use NDI, but there's plenty of tutorials out there. I'll link to a couple that were useful to me if I can find them. But I hope you enjoyed this little tour of how we record our actual play D&D podcast, our current campaign, Skald. If you haven't seen it, please check us out. The story's getting really good. We're starting to get into some really good mysteries and action. If you have any questions or comments, hit me up in our Discord, discord.forgeoflore.com. Always looking for new members of the community to come in and talk all things TTRPG, and of course talk about Skald, and you can talk with us or just leave a YouTube comment, especially if you know of a better and easier way to do this. Well, that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, maybe consider hitting that little thumbs up and maybe even subscribe if you haven't already. We got a great actual play podcast, Vikings and stuff, and technology. It's amazing. And until next time, don't forget the #1 most important part of any D&D actual play podcast setup: the dice. Ah, crap. Those went everywhere.